Hello everybody and welcome to the third video about how to use HLOD system in our plugin. In this video we are going to discuss about how to create the join mesh. Also I will show you how the layer system works in HLOD resource. In the last video I showed you how you can make a baker scene. In this particular baker scene my house has different parts. You can see at the top level I have my house structure and then I have other nodes dedicated to layer 1, layer 2 and layer 3. Also at the bottom I have some decals. I will explain about the decals, lights and packed scene in another video. Okay, let me show you how the layer system works. Basically as we bake this house, we will have exactly the same mesh in HLOD resource. But what if we want the same house with only small changes? Maybe we want a different furniture inside the house, maybe we want a ladder at the wall of the house, or a small fence outside the house. For this type of stuff, we can use variation layer system. Let me open layer 1 node. As you can see, all the nodes in the layer 1 section have a variation layer 1 active. The same thing happened for other layers too. Now on top, if I change the vehicle layer, you can see the object appear and disappear. So if I bake this house, in another scene when I'm using this house as a HLOD resource, as you can see, as I activate each of this layer, I can add some variation to my house. By the way, by activating and deactivating this variation layer, you are not only adding or removing the mesh, you're also adding and removing the collision shape corresponding to that mesh. The good things about this system is that we should not duplicate the HLOD resource to make a small change. And by this, we are saving some memory. Basically, I can add as many of these houses in the scene and all of them use the same HLOD resource in the memory. And also with this system, they can be a little bit different. But the variation layer has one limitation. Despite the fact that you can make your house different this way, you cannot have different join mesh for different variation. This HLOD resource can only have one join mesh. And basically join mesh is something that appear really far away. So if we make some small changes in our house or the content of inside of the house is changing, that doesn't matter. Alright, now let's create a join mesh. Click on the setting button in front of the join mesh label. Then here at the top, you should select at which LOD your house wants to use the join mesh. I leave it to be at LOD 4. And in the bottom panel, you should select which node should participate in making join mesh. So here I deactivated all the layers node. And I only select structure and then I click create join mesh. Now as I click on the fourth LOD and I click on join mesh, the created join mesh will appear here. Internally, our system will use the lowest mesh LOD to create the join mesh. So now click on the export to GLB. So this join mesh will be exported and then click on the Blender button to open the join mesh in Blender. As you can see, my materials also appear correctly in Blender side. The reason for this is that I introduced my Blender material to Godot. If you don't know how to do that, please watch the HLOD tutorial part 1 video. Okay, now let's modify our join mesh. There are a couple of things that you should pay attention here. First of all, the join mesh should be really low poly because it will appear only from the far away. So for example, from that far distance, no one will notice the bevel that create the window. Second thing which is really important, when you modify your join mesh, you should not change the origin point. If you change the origin point, when the join mesh appears, the house will move a bit. Also, it is important to know when your join mesh kick in or get activated, it will deactivate and remove everything else in HLOD resource. It will remove all item, lights, collision, pack scene, and so on. So this is the way I create my join mesh. By the way, I'm not saying that this is the correct way to do that. You can also do it differently. Modifying this generated join mesh for me is much more time consuming. I just create my join mesh like this. First, I select all corner vertices. Now I duplicate them by pressing Shift D and then I separate them by pressing P and selecting selection. Now I hide my main house join mesh and then I just start to work on these vertices. I select these 4 vertices and by pressing F I will add a face to them. I do the same thing for the rest of the house. I just unwrap the UV of this mesh and I just correct its material. After this, I want to also add some windows and doors for this. I bring back my original mesh and first I just select all my closed windows. I duplicate them and separate them. Then I scale them a little in the Y direction. There we go. And now we have some windows. Then I join these windows to my other low poly mesh. Alright, now we also have some open windows and doors. So how should we handle those? If you look at any house from really far away, usually you cannot see inside that house. Usually we will see a dark place inside. So based on this fact, let's create some open windows and doors. I'm just selecting 4 vertices at the corner of each window and door. Duplicating them and separating them. Like before, I am adding a face for each window and door, and just scale them in XY plane by pressing S and Shift Z. Okay, now as I don't want to add a new material, I use the same material for these windows. I just adjust their UV into the dark spot in my albedo image. By the way, you can add a dark new material for this. By this method, a lot of time happens which you have wrong normals. So now I just fix my normals. Okay, now I just remove the original mesh. Now this is another important part. You need to remove this 001 number which is created after the name of the object in Blender. Because after exporting this again, in Godot side, we use this name to determine its LOD. So it is good idea to have a clean name here. You can also change its LOD here if you want. If I put here 3 for example, this join mesh will kick in at LOD 3. You can even have multiple LOD for join mesh. So now to export this back to Godot, I just go to the export section and click on export join mesh. And it will automatically export it back to Godot. Now on Godot side, just click on re-import join mesh. And now if I click on force LOD and show join mesh, you can see my join mesh will appear here. Well, I just forgot that I want to change my material for join mesh. So I click on the Blender icon again, and here I am just changing my material here. Then I export it back and re-import it. So now I have created various type of the houses here, and I put them together in another baker scene. Here basically I just created a district of our town. Well, to create a join mesh for this, same as before, I just click on the join mesh setting button, and this time I choose LOD5 as my join mesh LOD. One important thing you should note here, when LOD5 kick in for this HLOD resource, it will disable all its sub HLOD including their join mesh. Okay, I export this and then I open it in Blender. You know, as our join mesh gets bigger and bigger, it will be more difficult to handle it. But let us see what we can do. Well, first I activate the wireframe mode and I remove most of the small objects which are not visible from far. Now I just want to remove all windows and doors because they are not visible from far away. So I want to narrow down everything that has a wooden texture. For that, I just hide everything that has a stone material. Now I want to hide all the rooftops too. So I select one face of the rooftop, then I press Shift G and I select other faces with similar normals. Then I press H to hide them. Well, now we have a bunch of windows and doors to remove. I select all of them and remove them. Now I have some windows and doors which have the stone material. I press Shift G and select similar faces with the same area and remove them. By the way, be careful because this way you can accidentally choose some faces which you don't want to remove. One other thing that you can do is to remove the walls which are close together and are not visible from far away. By the way, you want to put more time on this, but as this is just for demo, I will stop here. Also, you can do various things to remove even more vertices. For example, you can cover the entire town with some walls. So from the far away, nothing is visible inside your town. Then you can even remove more vertices. Okay, now I just make more different type of the district and I then combine them into a sector. I also create another join mesh for this, which look like this. And finally, I combine more of this sector to create a huge town. This was my way to creating the join mesh, but as I told you before, there's no good way or bad way to doing that. Everyone may choose a different way. Until the next part of the HLOD system video, have a good time and goodbye.